শুদ্ধ ভক্ত চরণ রেণু ভজনয় অনুকূল ভক্ত চরণ রেণু ভজনয় অনুকূল ভক্ত সেবা পরম সিদ্ধি প্রেম লতিকার মূল ভক্ত সেবা পরম সিদ্ধি প্রেম লতিকার মূল মাধবতী ভক্তি জননী যতনে পালন করি মাধবতী পালন কৃষ্ণ বসতি বসতি বলি পরম আদরে বরি কৃষ্ণ বসতি বসতি পরম আদরে বরি শুদ্ধ ভক্ত চরণ রেণু ভজন অনুকূল ভক্ত চরণ রেণু গৌর আমার যে সব স্থানে করল ভ্রমণ রঙ্গে গৌর আমার যে সব স্থান করল ভ্রমণ রঙ্গে সেসব স্থান হেরিব আমি প্রণয়ী ভক্ত সঙ্গে সেসব স্থান হেরিব প্রণয়ী ভক্ত সঙ্গে মৃদঙ্গ বাদ্য শুনিতে মন অবসর সদা যাচ্ছে মৃদঙ্গ বাদ্য অবসর সদা যা গৌর বিহিত কীর্তন শুনি আনন্দে হৃদয় নাচে কীর্তন শুনি আনন্দে হৃদয় যুগল মূর্তি দেখিয়া মোর পরম আনন্দ হয় যুগল মূর্তি দেখিয়া মোর প্রসাদ সেবা করিতে হয় সকল প্রপঞ্চ জয় শুদ্ধ ভক্ত চরণ রেণু ভজন অনুকূল যেদিন গৃহে ভজন দেখি গৃহেতে গোলক ভায় ভজন দেখি গৃহেতে গোলক চরণ সিধু দেখিয়া গঙ্গা শুকনা সীমা পায় তুলসী দেখি জুড়াই প্রাণ माधव तो शनि जानी गौर प्रिय शाक सेवने जीवन सार्थक मानी शुद्ध भक्त चरण रेणु भजन अनुकूल भक्ति विनोद कृष्ण भजने अनुकूल पाई जागा भक्ति विनोद कृष्ण भजने अनुकूल पाई जागा प्रति दिवसे परम सुखे शिकार कराए ताहा शुद्ध भक्त चरण रेणु भजन अनुकूल जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन जमुन तीरा वनचारी जमुन तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद प्रभुपाद 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 जगत गुरु शिला प्रभुपाद की जय।
Bhagavatam, 6th Canto, 2nd Chapter, Text number 17, given by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, recorded on September 20th, 1975, in Vrindavan, India.
Toi stani adhani puyante tapodan dana bhutadidhi na adharmajang tad hridayam tadapi isangri sevaya. So yesterday we have explained that we are put into such position in this material world. That we have to commit sinful activities. This is our position. Even if I do not want to do it, just like a man accustomed to steal, he is dictated from within, don't steal. Otherwise, why he goes at night to steal? He knows that this is not good. He does not steal openly, secretly, without any knowledge, because he knows that what I am going to do is not good. That's a fact. Therefore, sometimes it is called black. So, he is forced to do it. It was questioned by Arjuna to Krishna that how one man is forced to commit sinful activities. So Krishna replied, Kama esa, krodha esa, rajaguna samudbhavam. There are three modes of material nature, satagun, rajagun, tamagun. So those who are in tamagun and rajagun, they are forced to commit sinful activities. Forced. There is no alternative. Therefore, we have to come. Just like we go to school, college for education, what is the purpose? That we are ignorant, we are illiterate, uneducated, therefore we must go to school to learn, to become enlightened. Similarly, from the lower animal status, we are coming by evolution, and in the human form of life, especially in the civilized human form of life, the enlightenment is that one should come from this tamagun, rajagun to satagun. That is required. Therefore, the Brahminical culture is so much adored in India to make one from the lower status of life to the higher status of life. And that is very easily done simply by devotional service. That is stated here. Na adharmajam hridayam. Our heart is filled up with all dirty things, adharma. And it is very difficult to purify the heart. But it is possible. Tadapi, even the hard-hearted, stone-hearted rajagun, tamagun can be melted, can be reformed. How? Isangri sevaya. Isa means the Supreme Lord, Krishna. Angri means his lotus feet. Sevaya. This is what. In the Bhagavad-Gita also Krishna says the same thing. Man hipasa vyapasritya jepishu papajana. Papajani, punnajani means according to the infection of the heart with different qualities of these material modes of nature. That is called papajani. One's heart is too much engrossed with tamagun, rajagun. They are lower grade, papajani. And gradually, one who is free from the tamagun, rajagun, even satagun. Of course, satagun is taking the platform of goodness. That is the only hope in this material world, that one has to come by endeavor to the satagun platform, then the heart disease calm, hridaroga kama. It is a heart disease. Kama means lusty desire, simply to enjoy senses. This is called kama. Hridaroga kama, apunnati. So the Krishna consciousness movement means to cure the heart disease full with lusty desires. This is Krishna consciousness. And the perfection comes when annavilasita sunnam. No more any material desire. That is possible. Janglabdhya chapurang labhang mannati nadhikam tataha. If you get something, that's something, janglabdha, chapurang labhang, you are fully satisfied that I don't want it. Samin kitatosmi, barang na jachi. Dhruva Maharaj said, he went to the forest to undergo severe austerities so that he can see Narayan and beg some benefit to get a greater kingdom than his father. He was insulted by his stepmother, so the boy, son of a Kshatriya, he determined that I shall have a better kingdom than my father. So he got it. By Krishna's grace, he got it, the Dhruvalo, the pole star. This very big star. So he went for this purpose. Arthati, Chatudvida bhajanti maam, Sukritina Arjuna. Arthati, Artho Arthati. So he was in search after money, Dhruva Maharaj. And therefore, at 5 years old, he went to the forest. His mother advised that Krishna can help you only, others cannot help. So he was a simple boy. He said, where is Krishna? No, my dear child, I know that he is found in the forest. So he went to the forest. And he very severely, Narad Muni tried to persuade him, no, you are simply a small child. Why you are so much infected with the insult given by your stepmother? So he said, no, I don't want your advice. If you can give me God, just talk of that. Don't talk of compromise. I am not going. This is determination. This is determination. So he actually within 6 months he saw Narayana, but when he saw Narayana, then his all material desires finished. He said, Shamin kitatosmi, barang na jach. I came to ask you for some benefit, material benefit. Now, by seeing you, I am so satisfied that I have no more any desire to ask for. This is the ultimate state. No more desire. We may begin with desire, but perfection is that when there is no more desire. That is the beginning of bhakti. Annavilasita sunnam, jnana karmadanabritam, anukullena krishnanasilanam bhakti ruttama. That is bhakti. No more desire. So here, na adharmajam tad hridayam. Adharmajam. So long our heart is compact with material desires, we have to take birth after birth to fulfill that desire. It's automatic. So how to become desireless? Not desireless, but no material desire. There is desire to go back to home, back to her. That is natural. That is natural. To become a devotee, to desire like that, that is wanted. We cannot stop our desires. But desires have to be purified. Sarvapadhi vinirmuktam tatparatena nirmalam. So this is the process of bhakti. Therefore, even one is infected with the lusty desires, kamalubha dayaschaje, rajagun tamagun. Rajagun and tamagun means lusty desires and greediness, kamalubha. So long we are influenced by these two material modes of nature, rajagun and tamagun, then we will be pushed for fulfilling our lusty desires and greediness. And that will help us to become implicated in sinful activities. The people are becoming implicated in sinful activities only for this. Kamalubha. He is never satisfied and his greediness increases and we create sinful life. So there is this prescription in this Shastra that if you are sinful, you do this prayaschitta atonement. Tapo, dana, vrtadivi. Tapo, tapasya, dan, and observing some vratas, bhav, ritualistic ceremonies, are recommended. But here the Vishnuduta says that actually by these processes, tapasya, dan, natajyam, karjamevata, Krishna also says. What is that part? I just forget. That tapasya, dan, vrata, just like one has taken sannyas. Sannyas means he has given up all these obligatory ceremonies. But Krishna says that even if you have taken sannyas, you cannot give up these processes. What is that? Tapasya, dana and vrata. It is pavanani manishina. Even if you have become manishi, very exalted, great sage, still you should continue this tapasya. And tapasya means voluntarily accepting some miserable condition. That is called tapasya. Just like they used to perform austerity in winter season to go deep into the water. When one tries to avoid water, tapasya means one goes, you have seen many persons, they are standing within the water and chanting Gayatri Mantra. This is tapasya. And in summer season, they ignite fire all around and sit down. So these things are not possible at the present moment in the Kali Yuga. But little tapasya required. Without tapasya, you cannot be purified. That little tapasya we have prescribed, that rise early in the morning at 3:30, but they are so downtrodden, they cannot do it. Let me sleep 5 minutes more, I'll enjoy. You see? Such downtrodden. They were performing austerities, standing in the water in winter season, and we are recommending, please rise early in the morning at 3:30, be prepared for Mangalaratri. It is very difficult. Just see how much we are fallen. We cannot sacrifice, say, 15 minutes or half an hour sleep. We consider sleeping is very good enjoyment. I have seen in the Western countries, they want to sleep so much. That is enjoyment. Up to 12 o'clock in daytime. There are many Indians also. They sleep up to 12 o'clock, then they prepare for going to the office. Big man, he goes to the office at 4 o'clock, when the office is going to be closed. That is their enjoyment. I have slept so much, that is my life. I have eaten so much, that is my enjoyment. I have enjoyed sex life so much, that is enjoyment. He does not, the rascal does not know that he is becoming implicated for the next birth. If you are too much sleeping, then you become owl. You know. The whole day they can sleep, the owl. If you want to be naked, all right, you become a tree, stand 5,000 years naked. If you want sex, all right, become a hog or a monkey. Nature is prepared to give you facilities. So, purification means to stop this low-grade life. Low-grade life is there, otherwise where from they are coming? These cats and dogs and other lower animals, where from they are coming? Karmana daivanatrina jantur deha upapatti. We are creating the facility for the next body, karmana, therefore it has to be purified. That is called tapo. Tapo dibbang putrakajena suddhe. This is, my dear boy, Rishabdev instructed his children, 100. My dear boy, just prepare yourself for tapasya. That is the whole Vedic civilization, tapasya. Tapo dibbam. Tapasya for realizing God. This is the only business of the human life. Therefore Shastra says, Tassaiva heta prajateta kovida. Tassaiva heta prajateta kovida. Na labhate jad brahmatam uparajadha. We are, by the impelling of the material nature, prakriti kriyamanani guni karmani sarvasa, we are wandering throughout the whole universe in different types of bodies, in different planets, but we are not getting released. Therefore, our only business is to get released from this repetition of birth and death. Yajna, dana and tapasya. Krishna says, these things are not to be given up. That is human civilization. Yajna, dana, tapakriya. Not tajyam, karjamevata, it must be done. So if you do not do that, then you are not a human being. We are not. We are losing the chance of becoming purified and again implicated in the cycle of birth and death. So these things can be very easily done, as it is said here. Tadapi isas hungry sevaya. Simply by dedicating yourself at the lotus feet of Isha, the Supreme Controller. Isha means controller. Jagadisha. God's another name is Jagadisha. He is the controller of the whole universe. The Isangri Sevaya. That is the only way. So, that seva begins from tongue. Sevanmukhi hi jivhadu. You can begin Isha seva by the tongue, service. Chanting Hare Krishna, that is also by tongue, and eating prasadam. Very easy. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us this easy program. So don't deviate from this. Chant Hare Krishna and take prasadam, make life simplified and be happy. That is Krishna consciousness movement. Thank you very much.
प्रेमधान करुणा प्रचुर যে আনিল প্রেম ধান করুণা প্রচুর হেন প্রভু কোথা গেলা আচার্য ঠাকুর হেন প্রভু কোথা গেলা আচার্য ঠাকুর কাহা মোর স্বরূপ রূপ কাহা সনাতন কাহা দাস রঘুনাথ পতিত পাবন কাহা মোর ভট্ট যুগ কাহা কবিরা एक काले कोथा गेला गोरा नटरा पाषाणे कुटिब माथा अनले पशिब गौरांग गुणेर निधि कोथा गेले पाब शेषाव सङ्गीर सङ्गे जे कैल बिलास शेषांगना पाया कांदे नरोत्तम दास शेषांगना शेषांगना पाया कांदे नरोत्तम दास शेषांगना पाया कांदे नरोत्तम दास जे आनिल प्रेम धन करुणा प्रचुर जे आनिल प्रेम धन जय वैष्णव ठाकुर जय वैष्णव ठाकुर जय वैष्णव ठाकुर प्रभुपाद 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 प्रभुपाद
Hare Krishna. So today is the ISKCON of the dark half of the month of Posh. Posh is the month where there's Kitri Mela every Thursday in Belvan. I've heard through the grapevine the melas have been cancelled this year, but anyway, usually there's... The melas have been cancelled this year, but anyway, usually there's... And this is the dark half of the month of Posh, the ISKCON day, also known as Safala ISKCON. And we're gathered here in the beautiful temple of Sri Sri Krishna Balaram, whose construction was looked over in the beginning by two very wonderful devotees, Guru Das and Jamuna. And we're gathered here for the disappearance festival of Sri Jamuna Mataji. She was one of the most wonderful devotees of Srila Prabhupada.
A chance to read her biography,
If you ever
Lifetime of Devotion, you realize how shallow our devotion is, so deep.
our devotion is, she was so deep.
Instructions.
Her meditation to serve the body.
Just a little shallow.
Our devotion is just a little shallow. No like Mataji had. So while she was chanting japa on this Safalakadasi morning, she very peacefully passed her dear Srila Prabhupada and her Krishna Balaram. So there's a lot of people on the list, so you don't have to tell everything you know about Jamuna, whatever favorite pastime you can tell. So first on my list is our illustrious temple president, Panchaguta, so I'd like to ask him to make his offering at the lotus feet of Jamuna Mataji.
Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Devananda Pandit ki jai, Shri Jamuna Mataji ki jai. So as Dinabandhu Prabhu expressed, although there are many Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis in our Vedic culture, and many are glorified. Chaitanya Charita, Sri Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu established a Sankirtan mission, so Shri Rupa Sanatan Sankirtan mission, so and so many and so many close associates glorified and remembered, because they're all assisting the Lord in spreading the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, fulfilling the mission and desire of the Lord. So we're seeing in modern day times, because it wasn't so long ago that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur predicted, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati instructed Srila Prabhupada to come and take this message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and spread it all over the world. So naturally, those who very nicely assisted Srila Prabhupada in planting the seeds of devotion, of bhakti, and also were empowered by Srila Prabhupada. Her cooking ability was incredible. I remember when she was in Key West, my wife and I went and spent some time with Mother Jamuna there, and Shruti Rupa and others. And she was working on her cookbook, because everything in devotional service is personal, very meditative and very exacting. Her kirtan was very beautifully done. Her devotion and her love for Srila Prabhupada and for helping to spread this mission of Srila Prabhupada, taking on austerities and sacrifices. Especially in the early days, there were many austerities, sacrifices. There's still austerities and sacrifices, but they were very apparent. Just dealing with the elements, no electricity, no fan, the heat, the cold, the water, drinking water, and all the different austerities of trying to keep a kitchen clean and everything functioning properly. So she had a lot of Shakti, Shakyavesh, the power of the Lord. He empowers those who want to serve. So she was definitely empowered to help Srila Prabhupada, assist him in this mission of spreading the teachings of the Lord. Also, we're very fortunate that we have in our Goshala memory, Mother Jamuna, Brahmananda, many of the early devotees. And Srila Prabhupada, he underwent great austerities, obviously, and this morning's lecture he was saying that, encouraging, I just remember I was up late last night, the alarm went off this morning, it's time to go from just a few more minutes, and next thing you know, it's like it's finished. So the austerities of coming to, getting up every morning, Mangal Artik, Tulsi Puja, Guru Puja, class. Sometimes the mind is not right or disturbed, or there's so many things that we're doing and thinking. But if we see, that for us is maybe a great austerity, but if we see what kind of sacrifice was performed by Jamuna Mata and all the early devotees, numerous devotees, like I said, not that we're pointing out, oh, we'll glorify this one and not that one. We want to glorify all the Vaishnavas, all the devotees who have served. But because Mother Jamuna was here, present for the establishment of Krishna Balaram Mandir, and she did very substantial service for Srila Prabhupada, and her character was exemplary, her enthusiasm and determination. We should try to also imbibe that same mood and mentality. And this is the purpose of glorifying the Vaishnavas, to encourage us to also try to follow this discipline. It's not that we're on the Raganuga platform, we're still performing our sadhana, and we have to follow the rules and regulations and perform our duties nicely. And when we see good examples, and we see that those with, like I said, great enthusiasm and expertise, with focus to details. Srila Prabhupada was very focused on details. Sometimes we miss that. I know sometimes you walk around the property and you might see some things, and we think that we need to focus on the details. And this is what Mother Jamuna did. She gave great pleasure to Srila Prabhupada because she was obeying the orders, and also she was empowered to help carry out. She'd lead nice kirtans, as we're hearing every morning, Govinda prayers, but also in Pandal programs, cook under very severe austerity, and then also giving a very beautiful cookbook, such a nice cookbook that for the benefit of those who want to make nice offerings to the Lord. So today is a very special day, and help us to increase our enthusiasm and determination in our own sadhana bhakti. Mother Jamuna Devi ki jai. Hare Krishna.
So we'd like to thank Panchaguta Prabhu. No, that was good, for reminding us of the very wonderful devotional service of Sri Jamuna Devi. Next, I'd like to ask Shruti Kirti, who's a mine of all kinds of wonderful pastimes, please make his offering to Jamuna Devi.
Hare Krishna. So I was just saying, I always have the same few stories about Jamuna Devi that I tell. I was going to try to do think of something a little different. And then if you want, I can tell a story. I saw her probably 2007, 2008 in Saranagati. This was her later life. After 80s, she wound up in Saranagati, which is that's an austere place in its own. It's in northern Canada, and they get a lot of snow, very cold. And she had a place there where she stayed with Dinatarani, right? Dinatarani is her name. And that's the word I think he used, impeccable. Jamuna was impeccable in how she did everything. There was only first class. No other way of doing something. If you're going to do something, it has to be first class. And her place, of course, when I went to Saranagati, I stayed there for a few days, and immediately, of course, if someone came, she would invite you. And her home was a temple. Her deities were there. Prabhupada's cooker was there on the shelf, polished, always very clean, very nice. Her kitchen area, everything about the home was ideal. And even the building of it, it was done in a very, what did they say, a very simple way, everything done very nicely. And then they had built a guest facility as well, which was done with hay bales for insulation on the outside. But it was very nicely done. And at this time in her life, that's what she was doing, was taking care of the deities and entertaining, taking care of guests, treating guests as she had learned and wanted to do. From the time I first met her in 1972 at Radha Damodar Temple, it was very easy to call her Mataji, to see her as mother. We were both young, but she was maybe 8-10 years older than I was. But so young lady, maybe she was 30 at the time, but the way she presented herself, you felt right away she was motherly towards you. You had no other understanding than she was like your mother and wanted to take care of you. So 20 years later or so, in Saranagati, it was the same thing. She was so happy to see me. I was so happy to see her after many, many years. And even though we hadn't seen each other hardly ever in between, not at all, immediately there was that connection through Srila Prabhupada. Many times, like Brahmananda, we would say he was Prabhupada man. Jamuna, she was Prabhupada woman. She was Prabhupada's person. And when I went there to Saranagati, she immediately said, you have to give class in the morning. And of course, we just discussed Srila Prabhupada. And I could see in her, everything she held on to was Prabhupada's instructions. This is what makes a disciple glorious, is to follow the instructions of the spiritual master. And she followed them all so nicely, and she just wanted to hear about Prabhupada. And afterwards we sat and talked, and it was just nice to see her mood, that mood. And then the next time I saw her was 2009, and that was at Bhaktivedanta Manor in London, because that was the 40th anniversary of the opening of the temple in London. So her and others attended. And although she came to India, 1970 or 71? 70. So she wasn't in London a long time. Those original 6, they were there for a year or so. But coming to this celebration, this anniversary festival, and all the devotees from England, hundreds, over 100 devotees all attended, they had such admiration for her. She made such an impression in really what was a short amount of time, just a year or so. And that same mood was there. And her was always serving. She always wanted to serve the devotees, and never be served. And again, which brings right back to the very first story when I met her, that's what she did. She would cook prasadam. She would cook for Prabhupada in that little kitchen, Prabhupada's kitchen at Radha Damodar. And she would spend hours in there in the morning. And I was, of course, as Prabhupada's servant, I was cooking for him. Always in the West I cooked for him, but in India, didn't have to. But what impressed me right away is how nicely she prepared everything for Prabhupada. I learned from her how to do things nicer, with some devotion, hopefully. And I remember one of the first mornings there, because we were used to having whatever breakfast you would get in the temple, just like here, maybe khichdi, other places, maybe a banana and an apple, a little yogurt like that. But she prepared such nice things I had never seen. And one of them was so simple. But imagine, this was, as he was saying, austerities. We can still perform austerities. But in the 70s, you didn't have to labor to find an austerity. The austerity was already there. Automatically you were performing austerities just by being in India. For us, it was austere. Now we have to search for the austerities. If you want to do some austerity, you have to decide what you will do. But then no decision was made for you, just by the material nature. But at breakfast she had, and what did she cook? There was no gas stove or anything. It was just a bucket. It was a bucket stove and cow dung and little wood. And there was this miraculous thing. This one morning she put on top of the bucket. It was an oven. It wasn't an oven, it was just some tin, a tin box with a hole on the bottom that fit right over this bucket. But that was an oven that she would use, and she cooked in this oven. I was just watching how she did things. To me, it was unbelievable that you could even do something like that. And what she did this one morning, it was just an apple. But she cored the apple, so she took the whole center out of the apple and she stuffed it with cinnamon and raisins and sugar and who knows what else in there. But this little apple was one of the tastiest things I had ever had as a devotee at the time. And I was just amazed to see. I remember this apple to that day. I still haven't done it. I keep telling my wife, we're going to bake these apples like Jamuna did. Everything she touched, it became like golden. So it's very appropriate. We honor her today. She was a very special soul. Prabhupada gave her all facilities. There's even rumors. Prabhupada said, one of his servants said that Prabhupada said he would have made her a GBC, but people wouldn't understand. But he said she had such intelligence, and acted very practically and logically. She could do things. So, Jamuna Devi, yes. Yeah. I should tell that story? Yes, I'll tell that story. I've told it here many times, but again, I was just Prabhupada's servant for 2 weeks and still learning how to do everything. And then we wound up in Vrindavan for the very first day of Kartik, 1972. When Prabhupada stayed at Radha Damodar Temple for the entire month of Kartik. It was very wonderful. So Jamuna, naturally, she cooked for Prabhupada every day, which to me was my first surprise, because I was Prabhupada's cook. But there was no comparison. This was Jamuna. So I learned right away I didn't have to go into the kitchen for anything. And I would sit on the veranda between Prabhupada's sitting room and the kitchen, and I would just sit there and chant through the day. But this first day we were there, and Prabhupada, he walked past me. He would walk past and offer obeisances. He went into the kitchen, which I hadn't even seen. All I saw was a screen door, black screen door, and on the other side this young Mataji sitting on the floor for hours, just sitting on the floor with her bucket stove on the floor, her little little thing to roll chapatis, everything right there on the floor, which was also a shock for me to see cooking on the floor. In the West, as dirty as we are in the West, everything was done off of the floor on counters. But here, everything was going on right on the floor. I always remember one day, this is off topic, but one day Prabhupada was invited to one widow's house. Somehow or other, I didn't know who it was, who she was. She was an older lady, all in white, a Brijbasi lady. And Prabhupada went to this little place to take prasadam. And of course he brought me with him. So I would go along, and we sat there, and she was cooking, very simple, very excellent, very tasty. But I remember she would roll chapatis, and in between what she was heating up, the one chapati, the rolling pin she put under her toe. And that's where, and I was in shock. But this was all very natural. There was a different type of cleanliness that was there. Prabhupada even said that to us once in Calcutta. One of the devotees complained about the cleanliness, the way things were done in the kitchen. Prabhupada said, "You don't understand." That's how he responded. "You don't understand," he said. So Prabhupada went in to have his lunch, which is his main meal of the day. And just as I was cooking, Jamuna was cooking the same thing. She was using the cooker. And as I was sitting there on the veranda, I thought, I want to peek in the room to see what's happening, because this was my main service, was cooking lunch, bringing Prabhupada chapatis back and forth, topping up his sabjis, whatever he wanted, dal. And now I'm just sitting. So my curiosity got to me, and I went to this door, this screen door, and I opened it up and looked inside. And in this tiny triangle-shaped room, Jamuna was right there at the entrance cooking, and Prabhupada was at the side. And he heard the door open, and he looked, and he said, "Come in, take prasadam." I said, "No, Prabhupada." I said, "I'll take with my godbrothers after you're done." And he just looked, he said, "No, come, sit down, take prasadam." So 3 times. The 3rd time, I said, "Yes, Prabhupada." So then I sat right next to Srila Prabhupada, right there at that most center spot in the whole spiritual world at Radha Damodar Temple, and I'm sitting beside him. And immediately Jamuna, within a minute, she had everything there, a little straw mat for me to sit on. She took the thali, katuris, nice little katuris. Like Prabhupada would say, not too much of anything. He said, or you lose your appetite. So I had katuri, dal, rice, different sabjis, and a chapati, which she was making one at a time, right on these cow dung patties, chapatis, which they're the best. And she put the chapati there, and I'm sitting next to Prabhupada. It was the only time in over 2 years I ever sat with Prabhupada and took prasadam. And it was right there at Radha Damodar Temple. So I started tasting, and I realized I had no idea how to cook. Everything was just wonderful, so delicious. And for the next 15 minutes, she would serve Prabhupada chapati, bring me a chapati, just very quietly, just back and forth. She was very interesting because in a way, sometimes I say myself, a servant, you like to be invisible. Servant's business is not to be a spectacle. And she was like that. She's a young woman, beautiful woman, and she's just back and forth, but it's all you just taking prasadam. She had a way of not interfering in anything. So after the 15 minutes or so, Prabhupada was finished. Doesn't say one word as he's eating, mixing everything at the end on his plate. And then he looked at me. He said, "So, you liked?" "Yes, Prabhupada." I said, "Very much." He said, "Good." He said, now tomorrow you cook for her. I said, yes, Prabhupada. That never happened. I would have no ability to even do anything, and light the stove would have been a project for me. And of course she wouldn't allow it, and it wouldn't have been very nice. But this also was a very important instruction by Prabhupada. Huh? He just saw all his disciples, all just devotees, man, woman, boy. I was a brahmachari, so-called brahmachari at the time. But he said, you cook for her tomorrow because you've taken service. So now you have to render service. So it was for me, it was one of the most memorable times, even with Srila Prabhupada. And instruction was also very important. So yeah, very special devotee, disciple of Srila Prabhupada who did so much, and it goes on and on. Huh? Her presence, she also lives on and on by all the service she has done. So Jamuna Devi ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
So we'd like to thank Shruti Kirti Prabhu for some very wonderful memories, especially remembering how she did everything so carefully in first class, because she knew she was dealing with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His most dear representative. She did everything first class, none of this chalega. Everything was first class. So next we'd like to ask Gopal Prabhu to please make his offering of memories of Sri Jamuna Devi.
Vishnuvaraya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Iti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravari Vicharini Nirvisesha Skati Disatani. So I have to give great respects to Mother Jamuna, because her and a few other devotees are the devotees that introduced me to Mahamantra. So this was in 1967, and from that day, after hearing the mantra, the seed of bhakti entered into my heart, and I can still making offenses, but trying. But I'm very grateful for her in that respect, and we can see that the accomplishments that she was involved in, especially they were the first devotees to go from a far distance from America. Canada there was temples in Canada, but they went to England, and very shortly after arriving, they had an encounter with the Beatles, and they made the Govinda Prayer. It was on a record at that time. There was no CDs or whatever, but it was on a record, and so they sent records to temples. At that time there was 8 temples in ISKCON, and our instructions were to learn this prayer, and every morning we were supposed to sing this song, and Jamuna's voice was of course we all know it's so melodious and beautiful, and it was very nice, to hear and to sing this song. I was also fortunate enough that in 1970, Srila Prabhupada chose 13 devotees to come here to India. And amongst those also was Jamuna. So the devotees from the United States, we flew to Brussels. And in Brussels, we met up with Jamuna, Guru Das, Malati, Shamasundar, and a little baby named Saraswati. And from there, we proceeded towards Bombay. Now, I didn't know any of these devotees very well, but I was always scrutinizing them in their demeanor and how they would act, and because we had Srila Prabhupada, and he was exemplified in his bhakti, his being a pure devotee, and so he was the model in which we were supposed to govern our lives, and I never had much, contact because I was brahmachari and very strict, and never talked to women, never did anything associated with the women, but still observing their behaviors. And in the beginning, the big difference was that the ladies that had come in this original group, they became spoiled very quickly, because coming from America, there was none of the nice things that Vedic ladies have today, nice saris and bangles and this and that. But when we arrived at someone's home, the ladies in the house would spoil the girls, taking them shopping, buying them saris and this and that and this and that, and also cooking. And amongst all, Jamuna, she would always be in the kitchen, and she became very motivated seeing how these ladies in India cooked, the nice preparations they made, and she immediately wanted to replicate these nice dishes. And so she would cook, and after a while she began cooking, just as Shruti said, cooking for Srila Prabhupada. So she was the main go-to person for cooking for Srila Prabhupada. And also her kirtans were very nice. We would visit different locations, and many times the men would lead the kirtans, but on occasions Srila Prabhupada would want Jamuna to sing. And again, as we know, her voice is very beautiful, and she would sing and enliven the audiences, the people who had come to see the white dancing elephants, which we were known as at that time. So it was very nice. The closest I had as far as proximity in my relationship with Jamuna was that at one point in our travels, the devotees, we were going to go to Vrindavan. And so I was so excited. Oh, going to come to Vrindavan, coming to Vrindavan. This was still maybe 1970 or 1971. It could have been at that time. But we were going to come to Vrindavan, and I was thinking, my wish, my dream is going to be fulfilled. And someone came to me and says, Prabhupada wants you. Go see Prabhupada. And so I went into the train, and in the train room there was Guru Das, Jamuna, who was the wife of Guru Das, Giriraj, and Bhakta Bruce, who was later Bhanu Swami. So he was there. And then Srila Prabhupada says, you guys, I want you to go to Delhi. So I was thinking, oh no, I don't get to go to Vrindavan. My life is, incomplete. But one woman and the rest of us were men. We traveled to Delhi. And as usual, whenever you traveled in that pioneering spirit, you always left with nothing in your hands, no money, nothing. So we had to depend on Krishna. And we had nice encounters. We became successful. We met with Indira Gandhi, and all this time Jamuna, she was in the forefront and preaching how wonderful Srila Prabhupada was. So in this way, I still never really had close encounters with her because I was very strict. But as I said in the beginning, I have to be obliged and grateful to her and that other group of devotees for introducing me to chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. So, Jamuna Mataji.
So we'd like to thank Gopal Prabhu for his wonderful memories of Jamuna. Now, with permission of the Vaishnavas, I'd also like to speak something about Mother Jamuna. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I was president of a temple in northwest corner of America called Portland in a state called Oregon. And I can't remember, it was 76 or 77. Jamuna had a small ashram in the southern, in the north of Oregon, and maybe Grants Pass, I can't remember the name of the village, but she had an ashram there with Dinatarni. And it so happened that she was going to install some deities. She had gotten some very beautiful deities from Loy Bazaar, Radharani in dancing pose. So she invited, many of the senior devotees. Jayatitha came from LA, and who was it? Somebody came from Berkeley or San Francisco, wherever there was a temple, and Rivadinanda Maharaj came. But she was going to have a big festival. So my wife, she was 6 months pregnant. She just jumped on a bus and went there. She wasn't going to miss the opportunity. So for 1 week they were cooking for this festival. She really learned how to cook from Jamuna. So she was there for one week. Then we came down at the last and had this wonderful festival. We installed Sri Sri Radha Bana Bihari. Very exquisitely beautiful deities. So I was there for a few days. She told so many stories. Sometimes details that we don't sometimes find. Because she was introduced to Krishna consciousness by her sister. We know Janaki, Mukunda's wife, was Jamuna's sister. So, of course, we know in the beginning everybody was just living like boyfriend and girlfriend. There was no marriages, but Prabhupada didn't like that. So he wanted Mukunda and Janaki to get married. And they thought this is a great opportunity to introduce Joan, her name was Joan before, to Krishna consciousness. So they invited her to come to New York for their wedding. And so she flew out to New York, and that time Prabhupada had his little apartment behind 26 2nd Avenue. And at that time, Jamuna told us at that time in her life she was into something called macrobiotics. This is a special type of diet where practically the only thing you eat is brown rice and chikusan soy sauce. And everything else is maha hati aparad, mad elephant aparad. So especially butter, ghee, of course we didn't even know what ghee was, but anyway, all these things, sugar, spices, all these things were aparads for macrobiotics, a special type of diet. Some of us probably remember those days. So anyway, and we were just getting used to the idea in India, or wherever you went to an Indian's house, they served you so much prasadam and so many varieties of prasadam, and they just kept feeding you and feeding you. Say, no, that's all right, plate more. So they're not happy unless you eat heartily. So Jamuna came, they brought her to Prabhupada's apartment, and Prabhupada prepared a very special feast for her. And she looked at everything, all these things with ghee and sugar and spices and so many different subjects that were mahaparats. So she was just nibbling at everything, just sort of tasting and sort of nibbling at everything. And so Prabhupada wasn't happy because, if you eat it in Indian's house, they just feed you and feed you and feed you, So Prabhupada wasn't happy because she wasn't eating heartily, So afterwards, they were sitting and Prabhupada was talking, and then suddenly he reached and there was this tin can behind him on the shelf that had sugar crystals just flowing down, crystallized sugar just flowing down the edges of the can. And Prabhupada picked up this can. He said, "Oh, I know what you will like. All my disciples like it too much. ISKCON Gulab Jamun. Now here you have, this is the maha hati mad elephant aparad. Sugar, ghee, milk, everything all rolled into one, So Prabhupada gave her a Gulab Jamun. And at first she tried to hide it in her hand. But Gulab Jamun is not a type of thing you can hide in your hand. So she put it in her mouth and she was eating. And she knew, she told me, I heard this personally from her, she was going to throw up right there in front of everyone. And somehow she ate this thing. She somehow managed to swallow it. And she vowed within her mind, I will never, ever, ever have anything to do with this man for the rest of my life. She made this Kator vow, a very heavy vow. I will never, ever have anything to do with this man for the rest of my life. So then, somehow or other they were talking, but Prabhupada was so charming, she just made this vow, and he said, actually, it is the bride's side, you're coming from the bride's side, so it's the bride's side to make the feast. So if you will come tomorrow morning to this apartment, I will teach you how to do Indian cooking. So we know Jamuna, she was famous for her cooking, so somehow Prabhupada charmed her completely. She just made this vow, and he charmed her that she would come tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock for learning how to cook Indian cooking. So he said, all right, let's try it out, Then he gave her a list of all the things to get. So she went to the market and she got all the things, but there was one thing she couldn't read. It said Tumerind or Tumeril or Tumer something. He said, anyway, the old guy, he won't know that I missed one thing. So she came Saturday morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, which was, as we were listening to Prabhupada's tape, people used to sleep till 9, 10, 12. So 7 o'clock was a godly hour. And this detail you won't find in the Lilamrit, but she came to Prabhupada's apartment with her hair all over the place. She had afro like that, all over the place hair. She had jeans and a t-shirt with no bra. And she knocked on the door and Prabhupada told her to come in. And then he took the bag out of her hand and he went through it. He said, you didn't get any turmeric. You didn't get any turmeric. Immediately Prabhupada noticed. Oh, the guy won't notice, He said, anyway, I have some, it doesn't matter, So then he asked her if she could make a medium soft dough. And she said, for croissant, for this, for that. And Prabhupada said, how old are you? You don't know how to make a medium soft dough? And then with one hand, Prabhupada poured the flour out on the table and sprinkled the water, and with one hand, without even using his left hand, he just made this dough and had her making samosas all the rest of the afternoon. So anyway, that's how she became. Oh yeah, that's right, first thing. Our Indian ladies, they're very clean in their cooking, and they're afraid that maybe some hair will fall into the preparation. So can you tie your hair back? So Jamuna, she tied her hair. So because she touched her hair, I said, go wash your hands. And every time she put her finger in her mouth, she'd do something, go wash your hands. And she was making these samosas, go wash your hands. So, yeah, we'll tell. All right, first we have to tell this one. So, anyway, at some point, she told this story. I'm not exactly sure where exactly this happened, in New York or San Francisco, but she and Mukunda, she and Gurudas, they had some plan to go to Nepal. And because there was a special type of calligraphy that she wanted to learn. Because she was very expert in calligraphy. It means you make fancy letters with all kinds of decorations like that. She made the first initiation letters or whatever they were, first papers of ISKCON and everything. So she wanted to learn this special type of calligraphy. So they made this big plan, they were going to go. And one day she came to Prabhupada and she told Prabhupada they were planning to go to Nepal. And Prabhupada said, why do you want to go to Nepal? And she thought for a minute and she said, well, I guess we're searching for the highest thing. We're searching for the highest thing. And Prabhupada said, eyes got very big like a little boy, You've seen those pictures of Prabhupada with his big eyes. So, oh, you want to know the highest thing? You just stay here with me. One day I will show you the highest thing. And there we were in this little town in Vrindavan, installing the highest thing, Sri Sri Radhabana Vihari. So another pastime she told us was that one time they were in Calcutta with Prabhupada, and they had never met Pishima, Prabhupada's sister. So one day Prabhupada came and he told Jamuna that my sister is coming. And he told her, you have to cook this and this and this and this, and you have to cook it like this and this and that. And Prabhupada took her into the kitchen and he cooked this and this and that, and he made it this way and that, and she just watched. Prabhupada told her what to do, how to make it, and then Prabhupada cooked it himself, and she just assisted. So then Pishima came, and nobody had ever seen Pishima. It was amazing. She looked just like Prabhupada, a female version of Prabhupada. So she sat them down in the room, and they brought in these silver thalis and silver katoris, and she filled them all up, and then she was cooking puris and bringing the puris or chapatis, I don't remember which. Every few minutes she would bring one in, and Prabhupada was eating with Pishima, and they're both chattering away in Bengali, because Pishima doesn't know one word of English. So they're just chattering away in Bengali, and she come in and you want more, Prabhupada, and you go like that. Then one time she came in the room, and Prabhupada had finished everything. He'd taken all of, because he was just eating with great gusto, so much, because he was chattering in Bengali. Bengalis, unless they chatter while they eat, they can't digest, So he was just eating so much. So, if you eat too much prasadam, sometimes you get a little funny, a little intoxicated. So Prabhupada had taken all the silver katoris and stacked them up on his plate, in a big stack in the middle of the plate. And then he was holding one katori in his hand, and Jamuna came in and said, I guess this is still the time, Swamiji, you want something more? And Prabhupada took the last katori and threw it at the bottom of the stack, and all of them fell down with a big noise. And Jamuna realized that Prabhupada is completely intoxicated. And she just went, oh, Swamiji. And she said, what about your sister? Shall I give her more? And Prabhupada looked at his sister and said, she is so fat. If you give her anything more, she will explode. And then Prabhupada smiled at his sister, and she smiled back. She doesn't know one word of English. He just smiled at her, and she smiled back. He said, when I was young, I used to climb on her back and pull her pigtails. And then Prabhupada smiled at her, and she smiled back. So my first experience of Jamuna, because Shruti Kirti was talking about how she was a mother, was 1974, the first organized Mayapur Vrindavan festival. Now, of course, it's just Mayapur festival. We were all so sick in Mayapur. Instead of hiring cooks, they had us trying to cook, and we were, as always, they already described the crude ways things were done in those days. We never seen a wooden stove, and they're using this buffalo ghee, and our Western bodies weren't ready for it. We were so sick. And there was no generator. When the electricity went out, after a while the water ran out. And then you had to go to the pump, and your stomach was in 27 knots and screaming like anything, and you're going to the pump and trying to hold your stomach and pump at the same time. Oh, it was terrible. So somehow Jamuna and Gurudas, they were here because they were most instrumental. They started the construction of this temple, and they worked very, very hard, sincerely, because the Shruti Kirti described the austerities. We're sincerely indebted, extremely indebted to those first devotees that were all sitting here very peacefully in Krishna Balaram Mandir and relishing Krishna consciousness and like they did so much austerities. So anyway, they heard that what was happening in Mayapur. So she got the best cooks, and she trained them not to use chili and not to use all these things, and she made very cooling type of sabjis for us, and salads, and very nice chapatis. And I just felt like Guru Das and Jamuna were our mother and father. She, as Shruti Kirti said, she loved to serve the Vaishnavas. She served us so, it was such a relief after Mayapur. It seemed like nobody cared for us. But here, I just felt cared for by our mother and our father. And they did so much wonderful service that they arranged the beautiful deities. They had to go to Jaipur many times because especially in those days, you give instruction, you have to make it like this and this and this and this, and you come and they've done that and that and that and that. So every time they have to go and see these beautiful deities that we're relishing here, they were all designed and looked after by Jamuna. Yeah, no, I was coming to that one. This is another story that Jamuna told us about Vrindavan. Was that one day, this is before Krishna Balaram temple, this is the Prabhupada was still staying in Radha Damodar. And Prabhupada was coming, so Jamuna went to the Brishbasis and said, what's the best way to make rotis? So the Brishbasi, they all told her, you get this red Punjabi wheat berry, I forget what the name of it is, it's a red Punjabi wheat berry. You grind it in the morning, and you cook it with neem wood. So Prabhupada came, and Jamuna cooked for Prabhupada, and she sat him down, and she put the sabji, everything on his plate. Then she went and she got this chapati. She got in the morning she ground the red wheat berries. She got neem wood and she cooked it with neem wood. She brought it into Prabhupada, puffed up, put it on his plate. Prabhupada took it. He took some sabji and he took one bite. He said, this is the Punjabi red wheat berry. You ground it this morning and you cooked it with neem wood. Yeah, he knew right away. So anyway, at that time, Prabhupada was staying in his rooms in Radha Damodar. We know Prabhupada's room is downstairs. So many devotees started coming. So there was a lot of noise and disturbance because everything is downstairs. And if you've seen Prabhupada's house, there's a room upstairs also. The rooms at Damodar, there's a room upstairs also. Somehow that was empty. So they decided Prabhupada wanted to move upstairs to avoid all the noise. So then, and Jamuna and Gurudas had been living upstairs. And she knew there was this one old lady monkey that used to bother them all the time. Big old lady monkey. They had given her the name Kakati. And they said, now what's Prabhupada going to do about Kakati? Because she was always stealing things and tearing the laundry and just a complete pest. He said, how is Prabhupada going to deal with this? So they brought Prabhupada upstairs, and then they were bringing everything up. So she came upstairs with some more things, and the door was slightly open, and she heard some noise. So she just peeked through the crack, and there was Kakati at the window. And Kakati made some noise, and Prabhupada said, brrr, and Kakati said, brrr, and Prabhupada said, brrr, and Kakati said, brrr. And then the monkey went away. And Jamuna came in the room. He said, Prabhupada, what was that? He said, I told her to go away and not to bother me. So Prabhupada even knew the language of the monkeys. So, and the monkey never came back to bother Prabhupada. So, anyway, we owe an incredible debt to Jamuna for being one of the pioneers of Krishna consciousness and being so expert in cooking. Her cookbook is one of the most amazing things, and we're deeply indebted. So on this holy day of her disappearance, we just pray to her to give us, if you read that book, you'll see how shallow your devotion is. Just give us a tiny drop of the devotion that you have for Srila Prabhupada. Jamuna Mataji ki jai.
Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Jamuna Devi. So I didn't get much personal association with Jamuna Devi until she came here, and and she was having these every night kirtans in the MVT, and that's where actually she introduced our wonderful Akinchana Krishna. She had discovered him, and it was very beautiful every night for almost 2 weeks, I believe it was, in MVT, and we would all gather together, and we'd have these beautiful kirtan, bhajan, and she wouldn't speak much, but just her association and just her being there. And I was remembering this morning while listening to the Govinda prayers, when I was editing Mukunda Maharaj's book, Miracle, and he describes in there that when the Govinda prayers were first presented to him in Los Angeles, and he was listening over and over and over again, and some of the men were complaining, but this is a woman's voice, and the way that Prabhupada handled that situation was that he declared right then and there, this kirtan should be heard all over the world at 7:15 every morning in all of my temples to greet the deities. And so that's how he introduced the Govinda prayers with Jamuna's beautiful voice. So as we know, there's this beautiful book. It's available at Daivi Shakti shop, both the sets, Part 1 and Part 2. This is Jamuna Devi, A Life of Unalloyed Devotion. This is a preparing an offering of love written by her very dear god sister, Dinatarani Devi. But within the book, there's a lot of excerpts of Jamuna herself telling her stories with Srila Prabhupada. So one particular one, I've read this set twice actually in the last 2 years, and this is a very beautiful entry that Jamuna makes in her determination to serve Prabhupada no matter what. So it's called My Guru Has Asked for Rice, and No is Not an Option. Srila Prabhupada and the small group of devotees left Amritsar for Bombay via Delhi on October 27, 1970. Guru Das rode in first class with Srila Prabhupada, and Jamuna shared an unforgettable experience with Kaushalya and Srila Prabhupada's service on the day-long trip to Delhi. The Punjabi mail, this is Jamuna speaking from her notes. Dinatarani compiled these 2 books from Jamuna's journals, her personal journals. She had many, many journals that she kept of Srila Prabhupada for years and years. So she's describing, the Punjabi mail was an old train by this time, and the first-class compartments were closest to the engine. Srila Prabhupada's compartment had no air conditioning, and the heat was unbearable, just unimaginably hot. And the closer you were to the front of the train, the more soot you were enshrouded in from the coal-burning engine. So everyone was covered from head to toe with this black soot, even Srila Prabhupada. Before we left Amritsar, some Indian ladies had prepared lunch for Srila Prabhupada. Parathas, a dry sabji, sweets, kachoris, and puris. At one point in the journey, I decided to see if there was something that Srila Prabhupada wanted, because sometimes when the train stopped, he would request something from the men selling their wares at the train station. So Kaushalya and I made our way to Prabhupada's first-class compartment, and there we found him laying back just like a monarch, like a king, with one knee up, several pillows behind him, and a beautiful transcendental smile on his face. We offered our obeisances and asked if we could bring anything. Srila Prabhupada looked up with almost a childlike smile on his face and said, "Is there anything hot to eat?" "Would you like more of your lunch?" I answered. He replied, "No, not that. I would like some hot rice." I didn't know how to speak Hindi or anything close to it, but Srila Prabhupada had asked for rice, and it was our mood in those days to move heaven and earth in order to try to please him. It is difficult to express in words, but just to see a glance of approval from him meant so much to each of us. So I took on the responsibility that somehow or other I would get him hot rice. Having no idea how I was going to bring this hot rice to Srila Prabhupada, Kaushalya and I made our way to the kitchen, only to find two small, filthy men standing over a gigantic coal stove, smudged all over them with cooking oil, but also wore black, turmeric-stained shorts. With my lack of language skills, I substituted gestures to make the point that my Guru Maharaj wanted some gadam chawal, my mispronunciation of hot rice. They immediately laughed at my feeble attempt at Hindi, and we quickly realized that we had better find a conductor who spoke English. Finally, we found the restaurant manager, and he simply said, "No." I calmly replied, "I'm sorry, but this is for my Guru Maharaj. There is no question of no. I have told him I would do this, so I have to honor my word." He again said, "No, it is not possible." So then we went to find the conductor and again explained the situation. We went to find the conductor. This time I added that if I was unable to fulfill this simple request of my Guru Maharaj, I might as well jump off the train. So that got his attention, and I am sure he thought he'd better find some place for these crazy ladies to make some hot rice, or she just might jump off the train. So the conductor took me seriously and brought us back to the kitchen. Here we were in this train kitchen in front of a massive coal stove, amid all these ugly aluminum pots interspersed with various kinds of fish hanging from the kitchen roof. I had already seen in India how some people clean their pots by rubbing them with coal. So we cleaned out one of the pots as best as we could, boiled the water, made the rice, and then added ghee at the end. We offered a huge platter of very hot rice with ghee, fresh lemon, salt and pepper, and carried it all the way through the train to Srila Prabhupada's compartment. You know, if you've ridden in trains in India, the kitchen is quite far from the compartments. I knocked on the door and he said, "Yes," in that way he had of making it sound almost like a question or a crescendo. So we came in, set down this hot platter, and said, "Here's your rice, Srila Prabhupada," and offered our obeisances. His eyes lit up just like big saucers, followed by a huge grin from ear to ear. And he said, "Oh, my goddesses of fortune, they have come and they have brought me my hot rice. Thank you very much." Srila Prabhupada ate so much of the rice on that huge platter. "This is just what I wanted," he said. Along with the rice, he ate a small amount of kachori, puri, and pickle, and he was very pleased. For us, this was like climbing Mount Meru. We could not have felt happier to see Srila Prabhupada so happy, and that he had given us an impossible task, but somehow or another we accomplished it. And this gave him great pleasure, which in turn gave us great pleasure. It was simply a sublime experience. Later, I reflected that perhaps Srila Prabhupada did not even want the rice, but rather wanted to test our determination to serve. By his mercy, he allowed women close proximity to him. There was little separation. In our Vaishnava history, this is revolutionary, and the effect it had in India was profound. As we know, prior to Srila Prabhupada establishing brahmacharya ashrams, women going on the altar in the West, chanting Gayatri, getting second initiation, this was unheard of. This is Srila Prabhupada introducing this revolutionary idea and this activities in our Krishna consciousness movement. In our Vaishnava history, this was revolutionary, and the effect it had in India was profound. In fact, it shocked India. I felt at that time that whether male or female, we never took for granted what fortune we had been given in the form of Srila Prabhupada's association. In looking back on that experience, I felt a combination of deep gratitude and a determination to somehow make myself more worthy of the personal association he gave us. One of the things that Jamuna did comment on as we were in these kirtans with her for 2 weeks in the MVT is that she was commenting on, there was just a few of us that had personal association with Srila Prabhupada when he was here, but all of us can still have that personal association with Srila Prabhupada today, here in the temple, in his house, reading his books, and talking and praying to Prabhupada. And she emphasized this many times. That really stood out in my mind. And that just as we develop a relationship with someone, the more we talk with them, the more we engage in some personal exchanges, the same way as with Srila Prabhupada and with Krishna, is that we develop a personal exchange with Srila Prabhupada and our Lords. So thank you, Jamuna, for inspiring us. She was very much about the women taking their place in this movement, not as a feminist, in a feminist way, but more that we're not this body and we know our position, but that we should come forward and always be anxious to get that mercy from Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada doesn't discriminate. So I feel very blessed. And please go to Matchless Gifts and get this book. It'll be hard to put down. There's so many beautiful stories about Jamuna and Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
So we'd like to thank Mahadevi for some very wonderful stories about
Panchakalpatribhyascha kripasindubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for some opportunity to speak something about Mother Yamuna. Somehow I was lucky to have some very nice association with her, especially the last few years that she was with us here. One thing I was thinking of, if you listen to Mother Yamuna, when she's telling stories about Srila Prabhupada, she'll speak about herself in the third person. Like she'll recount a story and say, Srila Prabhupada was there, and Shyamasundar is there, and Malati is there, and Gurudas is there, and Yamuna is there. It's never about her. And I just really appreciated in my time with her that she was like a very big personality, a great personality, a very famous person. Many places, when she would go someplace, many people want to meet her and speak to her. But she was unbelievably humble, actually. Always kept herself very humble. I first met Mother Yamuna at the Sharanagati community that was mentioned, I forget, by Shruti Kirti Prabhu maybe, in Canada, north of Vancouver. I was on a youth tour that Kevin Prabhu was also on. He was probably there too. And so, yeah, it was a group of about 60 or 70 young devotees, think like teenagers and early 20s. And we were traveling around North America. We went to Sharanagati, and the first program that we had as soon as we came to Sharanagati is we went to Mother Yamuna's house. Mother Yamuna was there, Dinatarani was there, and several nice senior devotees. Jayadvaita Maharaj was there, Mahatma Prabhu, Yadubar Prabhu, Vishaka Mataji, Dravanaksha Prabhu was there. And so somehow in that meeting, someone asked me to lead the kirtan. And I chose kind of a unique melody, which was kind of an immature thing to do, but somehow that's what I did at the time. And we had this long, beautiful kirtan for maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours. And it's hard to relate an experience like that, but it was something very powerful. And afterwards, Mother Yamuna, as soon as the kirtan stopped, she just said to me, "Where did you get that tune?" and Dravanaksha Prabhu, he also came to me. He said, "Mother Yamuna really liked your tune." So somehow that's how I met her. I remember after that kirtan, I kind of went to approach her. She was sitting on a couch or something, and I was just observing how she was meeting all of the young ladies, especially that were on the tour. There was so many dozens of young girls, and just the way she was embracing them and being affectionate with them, and how are you, inquiring about their welfare. It was very beautiful, actually. It was really a real motherly exchange, and so I kind of waited my turn. I also wanted to speak to her, and finally, it came a moment, and I just kind of folded my hands and said, "Hare Krishna, Mother Yamuna, I've always wanted to meet you." And with full, big-hearted enthusiasm, she just said, "I've always wanted to meet you." Very sweet. And then, sometime later, one of the programs we had at that Sharanagati village is, there was a day where they wanted all of the young devotees to focus on japa. And the idea was everyone should try to chant 64 rounds one day. And so the day before that, some of the senior devotees, they were speaking about japa, the holy name, the importance of chanting. And several of the senior devotees, they all spoke very nicely, giving instructions about japa. And, one after the other. And then the last person to speak was Mother Yamuna. And I'll just wait for the bell a second. Well, one thing I can say before I finish that story, I have heard from senior people that Srila Prabhupada said, Mother Yamuna has bhava, or she's on the platform of bhava, something like that. It was something like she's a very advanced devotee. So anyway, so the different senior devotees were speaking, preaching about japa, and when it came to Mother Yamuna, the first line she said the holy name of Krishna. she like choked when she said the name Krishna, and there was like this like big pause afterwards. And anyway, my feeling was this devotee is different. She's a very, very advanced person. I was going to talk about that. There was one year, I think it was sometime in 2008, I don't remember exactly. Mother Yamuna was hosting, Mataji was mentioning, she was hosting kirtans in the MVT. And she kind of assembled her close group that she would hear and chant with. I remember also at that time, she had like a small group and they were chanting bhajans of Bhakti-Vinod Thakur. Like it was a real serious sadhana for them. They were going out to different holy places, and they would just pick one holy place and sit there and sing bhajans. And it was something wonderful actually. I remember one time I did it with her at the, maybe at the Samadhi of Sanatana Goswami. Just we sat and we sang bhajans for many hours. And in the evening there would be Hare Krishna Kirtan in her room. And my image of her, she kind of sat in the corner. She would have wampers, and she wouldn't play like, clanging. She would kind of just like gently play like this. She would hold them like this, always in like a very meditative mood. One thing she said at that time, kind of a strong instruction, forgive me if it's like a personal thing, but she, there was another senior person there, and she didn't say it directly to me, but she said to that person, Akinchana Krishna has a nice opportunity to serve the Sankirtan movement as long as he doesn't become a performer. That was like a strong, nice comment. Maybe that's relevant to the rest of us in different ways. Then at one point, my Guru Maharaj had an idea to put together a book where we heard the realizations of different kirtaniyas. And we heard like instructions about kirtan. And anyway, that book kind of went through different phases, but some form of it was published a year or two ago. But I was given the service of interviewing Mother Yamuna. And so I had some email correspondence, and it's much too long to read everything, but I'll just, if it's okay, I'll just read a little something. We asked her to describe what she learned from Srila Prabhupada's instructions about kirtan. That was the first question. She answered that at great length, actually. And I just thought to read a few lines. This is her letter to us, describing Srila Prabhupada, her reflections, her memories of Srila Prabhupada leading kirtan. She writes, when Srila Prabhupada leads kirtan, he opens sound windows to the spiritual world. It is obvious that his senses and mind are fully focused on transcendental sound. He often closes his eyes at the beginning of prayer or kirtan. Later, when the beat increases or after some time, he oftentimes opens them to observe his surroundings or the assembled chanters. This is especially true during long kirtans. In temple kirtans, he favors playing kartals or a gong. When alone or with one or two others, when chanting Narottam or Bhakti-Vinod prayers, he enjoys playing mridanga or harmonium. Srila Prabhupada's kirtan has no tinge of being a performance. It is purely for the pleasure of Krishna. It allows the chanters access to the fact that the Lord's holy name and the Lord are non-different. he said that the key to anartha-free kirtan rests in hearing and studying our literature and gradually rising to the platform of pure devotional service. Srila Prabhupada's kirtans and prayers are fully ego-free and are extremely potent. One morning at John Lennon's estate in 1969, Srila Prabhupada asked me what my favorite prayer was, and I responded, Lord Chaitanya's Shikshastika prayers. In return, I asked him what his favorite prayer was, and he immediately replied, Hari Hari Bifale by Narottam Das Thakur. Somehow that interview, it sparked some correspondence. I was reading my letters with Mother Yamuna. It's actually amazing. She was very, very personal. I was involved in a Sankirtan preaching group, I guess you could say, around that time. It was about 2009. And she wanted to hear all about it. She wanted to hear my experiences, my reflections. I also asked her questions, what she thought about different aspects of what we were doing, how we could improve. And, you know, one of the important themes that she was always kind of going back to, first of all, she was very strong that purity is the force. And she was very concerned for like the younger generation of devotees who were doing kirtan and getting some success, that they not be negatively affected by the fame that would come from that kind of service. And it seemed to me that she was really speaking from a platform of realization, because in her own Krishna consciousness, she made the Govinda prayers, and for that matter, the whole record with George Harrison. My understanding was George Harrison was ready to like sign her as an artist, and you know, could have made her even so much more famous than he already had. You know, her cookbook was like a #1 bestseller, and so. You know, it's clear that a lot of fame had come to her in her own Krishna consciousness, and she was worried that devotees not be like unduly affected by fame. Even one of the devotees who was kind of like, I guess you could say, like the leader of our Sankirtan party. He's a very charismatic, powerful person who was attracting many people. And I was just reading the correspondence. She was saying, you know, I was expressing how much like success he was getting and how people were kind of coming forward by his influence. And she said, yes, and now he will face the challenge of becoming famous, and this will be the biggest obstacle for him in his spiritual life. I'm not sure I have too many more things to say. Just again, there was more time I was with her in Mayapur. Oh, there was just another experience, like a very striking experience with her in Mayapur. I think that was a year later, maybe 2009 or so. I was standing outside of the temple in Mayapur and speaking to somebody, and just kind of unexpectedly, Mother Yamuna, she came to me and approached me like folded hands with like a blissful smile. Hare Krishna, I'm so happy to see you. I was like kind of startled, just, you know, by her stature. She's such a senior person, and just that, you know, she approached me so sweetly and informally. Yeah, and again, I remember we were at the house of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, like same programs, chanting bhajan, singing Hare Krishna. Her influence was always very strong. She would never lead the kirtan, but she was the leader. It was obvious that, like, you know, things were happening by her purity and her shakti. Even another memory I have is, you know, a few times she was kind of very careful how her space was around her, who was there and how things were going on, and you kind of had to flow with her mood for it to work. And there were a few people that would come, and they would be like a little starstruck, and they'd say, "Hey, wow, Mother Yamuna, Haribol, maybe you can sing the Govindam prayers." And it like you could see it really like wasn't her mood to be kind of respected or put on a pedestal like that. And I remember one time someone said that, and she said, "Yes, maybe we'll sing it together." Like that. Just one final comment, I hope it's okay to say. As I mentioned, I was involved in that project of collecting interviews from devotees to hear their realizations about kirtan. So one of the other people that we interviewed was Ayendra Prabhu, and we got like a really long interview out of him where he expresses so many things about his realizations about chanting, conceptions of chanting. And then when Ayendra Prabhu suddenly left in 2010, even though the idea was to edit the interview in certain ways, but anyway, we just published it as whatever it was. And a copy came to Mother Yamuna, and this is kind of the last that I actually heard from her. She read that interview with Ayendra Prabhu, and her comment was very beautiful actually. She was saying that because she was initially here as like the first temple president, Guru Das was the temple president, she was also there in the very beginning years of this Krishna Balaram temple, and she said, I had heard something about Ayendra Prabhu from my god sisters, and the idea I got is maybe she had a mixed impression of him. But she said, Srila Prabhupada really wanted that 24-hour kirtan. And it was such a challenge to make it happen. And she said, I was praying and praying and praying in front of Radha Shama Sundar to please send somebody that can somehow accomplish this service of doing the 24-hour kirtan. And she said, I didn't really know who Ayendra Prabhu was, but after reading this interview, now I'm just like so astonished what a beautiful devotee Radha Shama Sundar sent to do that 24-hour kirtan. Anyway, I hope that's all right. Maybe we'll leave it there. Mother Yamuna ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Jamuna Mataji ki! So we thank Akinchana Prabhu for some very instructive memories of Jamuna Dasi. And this ends, unfortunately we'll hear there's some unfortunate incident happen. Somebody has passed away here in Vrindavan, so she had to leave. So we didn't get to hear the wonderful memories of Devi Shakti Mataji. But anyway, we got some wonderful memories, and we just pray in the dust of Jamuna Mataji's feet. They give us a tiny drop of her devotion for Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. $12 there's program, of course, at Jamuna Samadhi.
Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare